Okay, thank you to everybody there from joining from the other sessions. I'm Niall Cooper, I'm the CEO of Fair Game. I'm delighted to have two fantastic people with me today. I'll let them introduce themselves and tell them a bit about their background. But basically today what we want to be looking at is becoming an ally. Really, how can we make sure that football becomes an environment that is welcoming for many people as possible, which hasn't always been the case, and there are still lots of things that we need to do. So I want to use this session really to be a bit of an education and an eye-opener for our audience and for the people that be tuning in now, and for people listening back later on, just to know a little bit more. So we'll start, just Chris, perhaps if you could introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we'll go to Tosin, and then we'll start the conversation going through from there. So firstly, Chris, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Niall. It's really good to be here. Happy International Women's Day, everyone. I actually started the day thinking, we say sort of Happy International Women's Day, but for me, this is also an angry one. I'm always angry about these things because I think there's a quote, I'm not sure whose it is, so my apologies. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And I think the anger helps us to focus on the sort of on the injustice, the inequality, but also helps to drive that change. So my name's Chris Powros. I'm a Spurs fan. I guess given this a football context, I'll lead with my football team. Tosin and I are friends, regardless of the fact that we don't agree on the football front, but you'll find out about that in a second. I have been a Spurs fan since I was 6. I went to my first game when I was 6. I've been a Spurs fan as long as I can remember. And it never occurred to me as a kid that football wouldn't necessarily be for me. I struggled a little bit in my sort of late teens and early 20s, which is around the time I sort of found my sort of political awakening, around the time I came out, and I couldn't quite match up being a football fan with some of the things that I was kind of experiencing in the world and thinking about the world. Fast forward into my 30s, I got a season ticket at Spurs in my early 20s. And in 2014, I co-founded and I still co-chair the Proud Lily Whites, which is the official Tottenham Hotspur LGBTQ+ supporters association. So I've been doing sort of stuff around equality, inclusion, anti-discrimination in football since then. So it started from an LGBTQ+ perspective, but as we know, homophobia very rarely travels alone. It's often with its mates: racism, sexism, transphobia, ableism, etc. And so it's really important to me that doing any of this stuff on LGBTQ+ inclusion was like constantly with an intersectional lens. And so that's what I've sort of been, that's how I sort of built my voluntary work, if you like, in football. I have got a day job as well, but I'm a trustee of Kick It Out, because actually from an intersectionality perspective, that was the thing I thought was important, was to say, actually, if you're looking at football's anti-discrimination, inclusion and equality organisation, then Kick It Out's the place. It was founded in tackling racism. It used to be called Kick Racism Out Football for many years, but then actually again also recognise that when you're talking about racism in football, you're not just talking about black men. You're talking about black women. You're talking about queer women. You're talking about etc. So that's what's really important to me. It's what brought me to Kick It Out. I'm also on the board of the Football Supporters Association and on the FA's Inclusion Advisory Board and FA Council. So I keep myself busy. I like to think of myself as slightly an outlier in some of those situations, because I'm sort of very first and foremost a football fan and an activist, and often you don't find activists in those spaces. But I think because I've got a business background as well, I've been working in business for 25 years, I can bring some of that sort of discipline, in inverted commas, as well as wanting to kind of, shake the tree a little bit. So that's a little introduction to me. Really pleased to be here.
Thank you very much, Chris. Obviously, we could talk about football at a later date as well, the actual kind of feels there. Tosin, do you want to explain a bit more about who you are, what your background is, and also stuff like that, and then we can start the conversation going as well?
So my name is Pearson. Since Chris started with her football club, I will start with mine. I'm a Chelsea supporter. Yes, I'm a Black Chelsea supporter. We don't need to go into it. But football is was always kind of the secondary sport for me. My first sport was athletics. And I did that all the way to uni. But I've always enjoyed football, going to football games, watching the matches and everything else. And it was kind of what led me to study my degree, which was business and sport management. And in there, I realized that I was the only woman of color on my course of 90 people. So that meant I was holding the weight of anything I said was going to be used against everyone else. And I realized as well, when I was kind of going to networking events and everything else, how first of all, a lot of the conversations were incredibly shallow and were not created to push things forward, but to put their mates on and make their mates look good. A lot of the time, even when they were organizations that are specifically for Black people, it was specifically just Black men, Black cis men generally, as well. And I was always one of the few Black women in the audience. And it made me want to do something about it. So I created a sports events and consultancy company called Sport Shifts, where we aim to platform Black voices to Black people by Black people. All of the conversations and stuff we have in our events and are things that I'm seeing in my peers and the groups and places that I run in sports. So a lot of the time I get told a lot of the stuff that we talk about is quite bold and quite innovative, but it's not really, because the people that I'm around, this is conversations that we've been having for years. It's just now on a bigger platform, and everyone we platform are Black people that I personally think should be experts, and the game and the sport is not recognizing them because they'd rather put their friend on than actually put people on who deserve to be it. And it's also just a way of showing people that Black people are experts in so many other things apart from race, and wanting to move away from the fact that every Black person should be a race-based person and move into the space of Black people should be allowed to be experts because they are the experts. When it comes to sports culture, sports fashion, sports media, it's always Black people who are moving things forward. So why not create something where we're continuing to push it forward in a way that we don't have to rely on mainstream sports anymore to do it. We're creating our own table, as we've been told to do for so many years, and we keep it moving. So that's a bit about me.
That's really brilliant. Thank you so much. One of the things I first wanted to start with is that a large proportion of football supporters are awfully like me in terms of appearance, and yet, when we looked at the Founder Review, the recent study that came through from Tracy Crouch, ED&I, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, was put right in the middle of all of that. And there's obviously a big issue within the game about trying to waken up and get people to realise the scale of the problem, but perhaps even more importantly, about how football can become the welcoming place that it should be, and it probably isn't at the moment. That's really why the session we've got today, which is looking at how can people like myself become an ally and make sure that the environment that you both experienced can be challenged and changed. Now, first thing, for me, I'd be really interested to know, kind of your experiences of what you've witnessed, particularly as you mentioned Chelsea. What is it like to kind of go through that and break that? Because obviously will be coming up against the stereotype of being a Chelsea fan as well, which for everybody looking at you, you're not the stereotype of a Chelsea fan. So it's really interesting to know how you deal with that double prejudice, if you like, and then how does the people like myself become the point that makes it a much more comfortable and safer and equitable environment within football?
It's a big question, and depending on who you ask, everyone is kind of going to give you a different answer, but I guess the main thing from everything that I've heard in terms of like having conversations with Black Chelsea fans is that we kind of distance ourselves from the main Chelsea fandom and just kind of have our own space and community ourselves. So sometimes I actually do forget that, the people I'm around aren't the only Chelsea fans. So when I go to games and stuff, I realize how big the club is, because, you find the people who look like you to protect yourself, but you also find the people who look like you and enjoy the game the way you do. And, some people say it's segregation. I say it's mental health. And yeah, so it's just, I think for me, it was finding people who look like me, who are Black Chelsea fans. And, there are amazing people that I've met throughout the journey who talk about that. And it's really timely you said that, because Felicia Pennant, who owns Season Zine magazine, their latest magazine has a whole section about being a Black Chelsea fan, especially being a Black woman Chelsea fan, which I took part in. And, reading that and seeing the other people's experiences, it just seems like we found our own space and we're building that space, and we are just focused on that particularly. We're focused on realizing that we know that not every Chelsea fan will accept us, but not trying to wallow about that, because there are so many other things to be upset about. And the way that I guess we consume football is so different to a lot of white people that it doesn't bother me too much either. So in terms of like making it an open space, I guess it's allowing people to find their own people. And I think sometimes when people like to do equality, diversion, and inclusion, they think it's forcing everyone to be in the same spaces all the time, when actually that's not helpful. Sometimes it's allowing people to have their own space and allowing people to find their people, and leaving them alone, and maybe giving them some funding and some money if they need to. So
can I ask Tosin, because I hope you don't mind now, but
yeah.
Tosin's just said, one of the things you've just said is like, like that other Chelsea fans won't necessarily accept you as Black Chelsea fan. Yeah. Have you ever found that actually, and this is kind of, it's almost more complicated, is that because you're a Chelsea fan, it's like, okay, it's all right, you're an okay Black person, and we'll be racist over here.
Yeah,
but you're all right because you're Chelsea. Have you ever experienced that?
I've experienced the opposite, where
right.
I've not been seen as one of the good Black people by other football fans, especially like Arsenal fans, because I don't know if you know, but Arsenal has this reputation of being like the Black person's sport.
Yeah.
Arsenal fan, if you're anything else, everyone is like, what are you doing?
Right.
Right. So at that, where I've had to defend being a Chelsea fan, being a Black Chelsea fan, to other fans who think that I should not be supporting that club because of its history. And, I'm not going to sit here and deny it, but there are so many other Premier League clubs who have the same history. But yet it seems like Chelsea and QPR and Millwall are the ones everyone seems to shine the spotlight on 9 times out of 10. So I personally haven't experienced I'm the good Chelsea fan. I've experienced that I shouldn't be a Chelsea fan.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
there's a lot to sort of unpack there. I think just going back to your original question, Niall, the first thing I always like to try and talk about is to try and move away from the term of allyship. And I know it's good shorthand for us, but I think my concern about using the word ally is that it still puts the onus on the person you're allying to be the other, if you see what I mean. So I haven't quite kind of come up with, I'm not sure, so maybe we'll do that today, with what the sort of the right alternative is. But I think something like championing, and so then you're not championing you're championing kind of anti-racism, or you're championing kind of gender equality, or you're championing inclusion more generally, because then you're talking about like, I'm a champion of those things, rather than I'm going to be an ally to women. because I think there's also a very what's the word, there's a very fine balance, and it's difficult, and I just think we all have to get over the fact it's difficult when you are sort of being a champion, of making sure that you can do that in a way that's not patronizing, and that you're not therefore taking up the space as well, because it's really hard, you know, if I think about it, saying I'm an ally, you know, if you're as you say, if you're a white man and you're saying I'm going to be an ally to women, and so let me just tell you how I'm going to be an ally to you. So, you know, that's great, isn't it? And somehow expecting, and I'm not saying of you, but I think there's some expectation that like you're doing good things, so you should have a pat on the head, regardless of whatever it is. And actually thinking about what it is that you're doing in terms of being a champion, and doing that outside of wanting, like kind of hoping to have plaudits for it by having your little ally badge or whatever, and just doing the work. And I think that's and doing it without being kind of patronizing, without being condescending, without, it's hard, and you'll get it wrong. I think that's the other thing, and we have to accept this, because, you know, I sort of, you know, I kind of do a lot of, as you know, as Tosin will tell you, I tried to do quite a lot of anti-racist work and do stuff around trans inclusion, and I don't always get it right. And I have to sit in that discomfort and difficulty and learn from it and move on. But what I can't do is spend my time saying to the person that I'm saying to the group that I'm championing or whatever, oh, I'm really sorry, what did I do wrong? Can you tell me what I can do right next time? And give them the work to do to make me feel better. Because then you've completely flipped it on its head, and you're doing completely the wrong thing. Because the point is, you're trying to champion an underrepresented or marginalized group as someone from a dominant group, right? So I use myself in terms of whether it's race or trans inclusion, because obviously I'm a queer woman, right? And yeah, and as I say, sometimes I do get it wrong, and what I can't do is then say, okay, can you help me figure out how I do it right, or want some kind of absolution because I feel bad, because it feels horrible, right? It feels horrible as somebody who's, with all good intentions, because that's the thing, good intentions of championing, you know, a cause or you know, other, you know, other, as I say, underrepresented or marginalized groups, and you get it wrong. But I wanted to do the right thing. Okay, yeah, but you haven't. So you have to like properly sit in that discomfort and learn from it, and not, again, as I say, not put the onus on the other people.
Yeah, no, I agree. The word ally gives me flashbacks to the summer of Black Lives Matter, and I was seeing infomercials of allyship tiredness and white people complaining about how tired they are, and, you know, how they should be allowed to take a break and everything else. And I was just like, this is insane. This is insanity. Like, this is insane. Or, you know, for me, allyship, that word is white people saying that they want to help, but don't actually want to do the work to help, but want to make themselves feel better. So a lot of the time it'd be like, you can call a white person out and they'll start talking about how much they've done for the Black community. And it's like, okay, but you're wrong. You're still wrong. I don't care if you go and volunteer your time at a food bank. What does that have to do with the situation now? And yeah, it's a weird one. I think for me, it's a weird word, because it's when white women use that word against you as a Black woman when you've called them out for something, and how, oh, but, you know, I'm a woman, I'm oppressed. You know, I was like, okay, what does that have to do with the situation here now, where you're not being a good ally, you're just doing it because, or you're just saying stuff to make yourself feel better, but you aren't willing to put in the work because you don't feel like you should.
You know, absolutely fascinating. One of the issues is, and like, you know, I say I'm on the board of the Dons Trust who run AFC Wimbledon, and you know, I'm probably among the more championing, use that word now, than a number of other people within the club. And the issue I get is I get accused of being woke an awful lot. And you know, certainly we had elections and being thrown, I was considered to be the woke candidate, if you like. I'm quite proud to be woke for that reason, because I kind of think it's kind of a semi-insult that you're throwing at me because I actually trying to care. Now, that's the issue. Then my other day job is I work for Amnesty, and Amnesty is coming from a completely different perspective. So I can get called not being woke enough at Amnesty and then being far too woke in the football world. It's quite a different element about trying to balance that. So my point really here is, now I'm coming from a world of naivety, and I think it's really important to realize that. So when you're saying, right, actually, don't be patronizing, don't kind of pat yourself on the back, all those sort of things are things that I've kind of began to learn over the last couple of years, and it is really been over the last couple of years. That's going to ask the question, I know you're going to not like it, but it's like, how does the white male, and there are an awful lot of us in football, learn to be different? What is the path to make sure that we do championing without being patronizing, and without, and I think this is a really significant one, throwing it back, which is exactly what I'm doing now, by the way, I'm very guilty of it, throwing back at you to say, right, well, how do we do this different? How do you do that bit of actually saying, right, actually, I want to be different, I don't want to be doing it wrong, but how do you actually, how can I do that without putting the pressure on you to be, because that's something that I'm also very aware of, being that guilt trip, because obviously you're talking about people that struggle on a day-to-day basis, rather than me just going, oh, look, I've spent half an hour tackling people accusing me of being woke, which is just nowhere near the same level. But it's that kind of element of how does the white male majority make football to be a place where everybody is championing all the rights of the various minorities within our society? Such a large question, but also, and such a very unfair one, but I really wanted to.
I guess the first point is admitting when you're wrong, which doesn't happen that often. You'd be surprised that people don't want to admit that they're wrong, or they've messed up. I think that's the first point. No one's expecting anyone to be an expert. Just because I'm a Black woman doesn't mean I'm an expert in this stuff. I mess up all the time as well, because I fail to sometimes understand my own privileges as being a Black woman, because, you know, outwardly I don't look disabled. You know, outwardly depending on who's asking, outwardly I look feminine and all that stuff. There's still aspects where I'm still not great at, but I admit it when I'm wrong. But it also has to come from within as well. I think a lot of people think that the marginalized who are pushing the conversations forward had all the answers. We didn't. We had to do our own unlearning, because we live in a world that wasn't created for us. So we subconsciously have taken in a lot of bad messaging. So it's about wanting to do the unlearning and wanting to put in the effort. And it doesn't mean that people need to know about it. You can just quietly do it, because then you start realizing as you're quietly doing it, you're finding the resource, which honestly you can type into Google. At this point from 2020, there are so many resources out there that I do not accept the whole, oh, I don't know where to start. You can actually just type in anti-racism books in Google and it will absolutely pop up. It's about doing the unlearning. And that's the thing that people don't want, because the unlearning is hard. It's grueling. It's something that you're going to have to be doing for the rest of your life. Like, I'm having to unlearn every day the messaging that I've been taught about being a Black woman, not just in sports, but just generally in society. But you don't see me going around being like, oh, look what I've unlearned today, because it's not part of the point. The point is that if you want to put in the work, you will put in the work. And the problem is people get to a point where they're like, oh, I want to do it. And then they realize how hard it is. And then they stop. And they're like, oh, okay, I've done enough now. And I think the other one is knowing where you don't know and finding people who do know. So if you are doing something, you know, and you know you don't have it, seek people out. Seek them out. And there are paid professionals who do this on a regular basis. Seek them out, get them to help you, get them to take over. Because it's not just a one-person effort, it's a group effort. Everyone has their weaknesses and everyone has spaces where they don't know things, but there is always someone who does know what you don't know. and seeking them out is the best way to do so. So that is it for me as well, like admitting when you're wrong, doing the work and doing it quietly, and finding people and seeking people out who know your weaknesses, who can cover that up. So if you don't know how to, for example, engage the Black community in your organizations, if you're doing it, there are people who can absolutely do that. So you seek them out, you bring them in, and you build a team. Because, for example, that person may only know how to engage cis Black men, but there's someone else who knows how to engage cis, Black women, and there's someone else who knows how to engage Asian women. There's always people who have the building blocks. And I think the problem is everyone wants to do it on their own, and it's not possible. It's absolutely not possible to do it on your own, because no one knows everything. No one's an expert at every single thing. No one can push back at every single thing. Not everyone is strong enough to push back at every single thing. There are things that I've seen that I've let slide because, first of all, I didn't feel safe or comfortable to do so, or I didn't know.
I think I'd love to build on Tosin's point of unlearning, actually, because I think what's really interesting there is that one thing that we don't, I don't think we talk about enough is that all of us grow up in structures that are patriarchal, racist, etc. Right? And it just is. And that's what you have to unlearn, is how you operate in that. So I think that's sort of the answer to this question. I once saw an analogy of when a fly is stuck in a bottle, it doesn't know it's stuck in a bottle until you let it out. And then suddenly it's in another place and it has to learn how to navigate this different place, because in this whole time it's been stuck in this bottle. And so I think that's the same thing here, is that, you recognize, and that's why it is an everyday thing, you recognize that we do live in these patriarchal and racist structures, and we have to unlearn them. And sadly, as much as I'd love to think that there's a silver bullet, there isn't. But I noticed Mark's question in the chat, and I think as Tosin said, Google is your friend in these, but that's not like a sort of, I don't want that to sort of sound like a flippant or sort of patronizing remark. There are lots of things that you can find, whether it's articles, guides, compilations, features. There isn't a one size fits all. But actually, if we think about what might be the top priorities, because I did do a little bit of thinking before we started here, to become sort of effective, active, and knowledgeable, right? So, you could probably find guides to allyship, literally. There could be things called that. But, I think people need to, as Tosin said, you go on your own journey. And I think you could probably think of there are I don't know, 6 things, right? The first is read up. So you empower yourself. If you want to be, an effective champion, don't ask your friends, colleagues, etc. to explain. As we said earlier, it's not up to them to do the work for you. Take that responsibility for educating yourself and for developing a good understanding of what misogyny and sexism are, what racism is, what homophobia is. And you can come up with the terminology. If you think about, I'm not sure what this term is, there are usually good things to tell you. And become clear that this stuff is systemic and structural. And again, as I say, it's difficult often to sort of explain and grapple with it. But being sort of informed for yourself is important. 2 is to step up and be visible. And that can be, being part of this conversation, and saying, I went to this thing, etc. Talk about those things that you've read. Talk about the terminology that you've recently discovered, and think about how you build inclusive cultures in whatever places you are, whether you're in your workplace, in your football club, etc. And I think speaking up is the third thing. And I think speaking up is so important if we're talking about what it means to be a white man in football. And I'm not just talking about in a stand, in a stand, I'm talking about all those WhatsApp groups you're in, where something kind of a bit sexist, racist, whatever comes up, and you feel uncomfortable. but you don't feel like you want to be the one that puts your head above the parapet. Maybe it's because you're going to be accused of being woke, but actually, I don't know why that's bad, to be honest. So I want to kind of flip the script on that as well. I'm not a hugely fan of the term, but I understand it as a shorthand. But, you know, let's flip the script on that, of what it is that to be sort of be accused of that, and make the culture, try and flip those cultures in those WhatsApp groups to that being the outlier, the sexism being the outlier. And I know it's often scary to be the person that speaks out in that context, right? But silence makes you part of that problem, because actually silence is compliance in that context, right? And it can embolden others to keep going. So, you know, if you do challenge those tropes in your WhatsApp groups, that's great. And on the flip side, when your behavior is called out for being sexist, if we're talking about sexism and misogyny, quit the defensiveness. Don't go on about how guilty you are. Don't make yourself the victim, right? Because actually that's a way of silencing the person that's taken something for them to say, do you know what, that's not on. So, you know, there are worse things in life than having your behavior labeled as sexist or misogynist. So don't worry, or racist. So don't worry about it, but learn from it. Where did I got to? 3, 4, challenge stereotypes and misconceptions and misuse of language, which we've talked about, etc. You know, I've talked about that, for example. And the next thing is to look around and notice who's there. You know, look around. You know, are you in a stand full of men? Are you in a meeting that's only got men in it? Are you on a board that's only got men in it? Are you in a panel that's only got men in it? And in those moments, then you've got to think about then who's making the decisions. So regardless of any of your positions in that, think about how you bring women into those contexts, right? And make sure that, you know, and then, you know, and build alliances. As Tosin just said, that's how you kind of build those alliances from different groups. And then finally, I think, you know, listening is kind of crucial. It might sound obvious, but having someone to talk to if you're in that one of those minoritized groups, or marginalized groups, if you like, be proud of the fact that someone sees you as someone they can talk to, as that champion, etc. But actually listening to women when we're talking about it is important in terms of believing us, because actually it's another thing that we talk about is, you know, whether it's sexism and misogyny or stuff around harassment or violence, women are very often not believed. You know, if you think, I mean, you think about if a woman is assaulted, in any way, you have to prove it. Now, if someone came and burgled your house, you wouldn't kind of go through a whole rigmarole of proving that you've been burgled. You'd be listened to about being burgled. You wouldn't go, did you leave the door open? I don't fucking leave the door open. Excuse my language. Sorry, this is being recorded. My apologies. No, I didn't leave the door open. And that's exactly the point. So, you know, commit to believing, and, you know, commit to learning about the stuff we've talked about, commit to being sort of, you know, somebody who calls out that toxic masculinity, for want of a way of putting it. Hold other men to the same standard that you hold yourself, and challenge yourself to imagine the gender equal world that you want to live in, and imagine what your part in that world should look like. And, you know, spoiler alert, it should also probably be anti-racist, anti-homophobic, anti-transphobic, anti-ableist, etc. So, as I say, that's just a little romp through, you know, if you want to sort of be that champion, there are those sort of 6 things. I know it's a lot to take in.
I mean, for us, obviously, I think it'd be really useful to you can send us those 6 so that we can get it up on the chat. I think that's really, really useful for us to make sure it goes through, because obviously the audience here, a lot of the people here will be, people listening back will be representatives of clubs. And what I think is very important from a fair game perspective is that we provide that opportunity for learning and for development and getting those right bits of advice, which for me leads on to my next question, which is really, imagine you're now speaking to, which you kind of are, a load of CEOs of football clubs. what is the steps to, as the family review talks about, really embedding EG&I? You know, apart from admitting their ignorance, which I think is probably quite a big one here, what else would be the right steps for a CEO? What would you like to be seeing a CEO doing on a website interview tomorrow? What would be the thing that would be considered for you, both of you, to be a turning point? Massive question.
It's a big question. I guess for me, one of the things that I have been seeing from football clubs and stuff is them trying to get more women on board and using organizations, but not doing background research on the organizations that they're working with. And what that does is it shows people that you don't actually care that much, because if you did do background research in some of these organizations you're working with, you would not be working with them. It's a reflex of, oh, these people look good, so let's work with them. So actually doing background research on people sounds so simple, but it's not done. It's not something that's done. Just because someone has come to you doesn't mean that you automatically have to choose them. So I guess that's number one, having, doing background research. Also, not trusting organizations that are only just white. So yeah, it may be white women, but don't use them if it's just white women, because it's still not representative. You're just then trying to cater to another group of white people, essentially, where nothing really is going to change, because yes, white women suffer from oppression, but white women are also oppressors. And when you're working with just white organizations, you're not trying to change anything. You're trying to make things easier for white women, who would then turn around and then oppress others, instead of actually trying to bring everyone in. So I guess that's number two. Don't work with just all white organizations. Any organization you want to work with, have a look at their diversity breakdown. How many of those people are Black? How many of them are Black women? How many people are part of the LGBT community? Is that organization LGBT safe? Is that organization disability safe? Even if it's 3 people and they fit that criteria over a well-structured organization that is just full of white women, you go with those 3 people. You do not go with those white women, because no change is going to happen that is actually going to help everyone. That's what I would say. Really look and do research on people that you're working with, making sure that the people that have set these organizations up aren't racist, because there are a lot of them that are, and they're talking about how they want to make the place better, but they're racist, they're transphobic, they don't think trans women are women, they're ableist. But because they are part of one minority group, people think it's okay. And it's like, no, it has to be people who fit more than one minority group. It's fantastic that organizations and football clubs and stuff are going outside themselves to find organizations, which is something that a lot of us have been screaming for years, because we know that it can't just be them doing the work. It has to be other people coming in to help you. But you have to do the background research on these people. You have to look at the organizations. What is the point of working with organizations that look like your organization? What change is actually going to happen? What change is going to be influenced? You want to be working with organizations that don't look like your organization, so you have something to look at. Being like, okay, in 5 years' time, this is what we want our organization to look like. This is where we want them to come from. This is how we're going to try and reach them out. And it's a group effort. It's not just one organization to come in and do it. Yeah, you can work with organizations to help you, maybe help the women, but what are you doing for non-able-bodied people? So I guess that would be my one, really. Work with other people, but look at their backgrounds, do background checks, do tweet checks, do tweet checks, check out what they've been saying. Check out how they interact with people, check who they're following. Because there are a lot of people in sports who are creating all these organizations that are friends with racists, that are, friends with people who are TERFs. And it's like, you can't make change with people who are part of the problem. It doesn't work like that. so yeah, you may be thinking you're doing the right steps, and you are, by looking for people. And I think it's absolutely commendable for organizations who have done that, because we all know we can't do it alone. But then you're throwing away everything you're doing and your credibility by working with people because you haven't done a quick background check on who they're friends with, who they've built relationships with, what other organizations that they've worked with. Even if it means you work with the foundation and you go out of your way to find people in the community rather than big organizations, do that, because at least the foundation has that relationship with that community. A lot of clubs who have foundations don't utilize the foundation's links to the communities well enough, in my opinion. If you don't want to find someone else, talk to the foundations that you have in your clubs. Talk to them. Who are the community leaders that they've seen? Who are the people who are driving the change on the ground? Who are the people that people in your football club look to? Who are those leaders? And utilize them instead if you don't want to go and find someone else, because 9 times out of 10, they'll probably do the better work, and they should be paid for that work as well.
Well, there's a lot there, as always.
Yeah.
And I think
I head away to a lot of it with both. I sit here with 2 hats, obviously CEO of Fair Game, and then obviously being on the board of the Dons Trust. There's a lot I can see and a lot that we need to learn from both organisations. And I've got a lot of time for the AFC Women Foundation because of the work and links they have within their community. I think that's a very interesting step for a message to take to CEOs, is that actually if you want to make a step forward, then you're not going to make a bad first move by opening the door much wider to your foundation and getting them to help, or at least learn and listen, which I think is one of the 2 things that you've talked on there.
I think the other important, I'm just really keen, because I think questions like this are important, but we've also, I will always go into them saying there is no silver bullet. It's hard work every single day, and it's not like we're going to launch this initiative and suddenly you're going to fix this thing, we're going to be all right. It's like you have to do the work every day. And as Tosin sort of started, there's kind of work to sort of diversify boardrooms, which is good, because actually you change the top of an organization, it does make a difference to what the rest of your organization looks like, what the culture feels like, etc. But there's for me, there's no point in having women at the top of your organization if, like Tosin said, it's you're only talking about perpetuating the same structures. So you just have to behave in the same way as all the men have always behaved in order to be in that boardroom, because that's not going to change anything, right? But I think you do, you change the top of your organizations. So a really interesting article in The Athletic just earlier today, talking about women in football roles in football clubs. And I think across the 20 Premier League clubs, they identified 33 women in football roles alone across all 20. Talk about how that's got, how that's got better. And there are more women that work in business roles, or you see a woman working in football, it's like, oh, you must be in the marketing department or in hospitality. So I think it's kind of breaking some of those boundaries by, like, women can work in football roles. It's like, we understand football as well as men do. And, there are plenty of men out there who I talk to who go, oh, I'm not interested in football at all. Just like there are women who say, I'm not interested in football at all. There's no reason why, I appreciate that the Premier League is a men's competition, but there's no reason why men should be more interested in it than women. I don't see where, what that's gendered, and like women having to prove themselves as football fans isn't helpful. But as I say, yeah, so more women in the boardroom, more women in those football roles. The stories there of, like, this was like 20 odd years ago, but like how you wouldn't have women in the dressing room environment because they'd be too distracting, because then what you're saying is that women can't be professionals, women can only be sex objects, etc. So I think that's really important. So breaking that stuff down by having more women in football roles, thinking about your cultures. What does your day-to-day organizational culture look and feel like? And football clubs often don't, like in the way that the best corporations do that work on their people and on their cultures. Football clubs often don't, I think, in my experience. I don't know many of them, but is that deliberate work being done on your organizational culture and making sure that you have a properly inclusive culture? As I say, normalizing the fact that women are part of the sort of a part of football. And then, as Tosin said, it's like, work really hard on your supply chain. And that's everything from who you use to do the recruitment, if you're talking about recruitment, to who you've hired for those roles in terms of, make sure they're not friends with racists. Make sure you don't have to, step back from a high profile appointment you've made because you've suddenly realized that someone's been a misogynist or transphobic in the past. So I think, as I say, and it's work every day, because work on your culture is every day in order to have a kind of a function, a kind of a high performing winning culture, because winning matters. We're talking about sport. You have to work hard on it every day.
Brilliant. I believe we're just coming up, so I'm just going to see if there are any questions coming through. I haven't seen many more on the chat, but opportunity to just ask some more questions. You're certainly educating me quite a lot, which is exactly what I wanted to happen out of this session, to be honest. It's like, which one am I going to chair? I'm going to chair this one that Chris and Tosin are going to busily change my attitude. No, help educate me. It's what I wanted to do. And I hope that, a lot of other people listening in and listening back are also educated from what we've done and changed how we're doing.
I think what I hope is important here is that it's the beginning of something for anybody who's listening to this. Maybe there's just one thing that sparked a thought about how you either navigate the world or how you operate in your football club, or the thing that you think that the future that you want to make, not just for the women in your life, but for the men in your life too, actually. Because I think often you find, particularly in football, I've found lots of men with great intentions who say, well, I've got a daughter, so I want to make sure that this kind of works for her. And I understand that's with good intention. As Tosin's rolled her eyes there, because actually that's frustrating, because, the world that we're talking about building here is a one that's better for all of us. It's better for men too, because actually I imagine that some of these kind of gender roles that we are perpetuating through all of this aren't much fun for a lot of you either. To have to sort of play, a lot, it feels like cosplay a lot of the time. And I imagine it does for you too. So, I hope that, as I say, some of this stuff has sparked something to try and sort of make to begin on that journey of change.
I guess another thing is, well, I know this whole thing happened already and then it kind of dropped off, but diversifying your social media and actually following people with different voices and different opinions as well. I've mentioned this already, but Season Zine have done like amazing like guides of who to follow, why you should follow them and stuff. And they're one of the people who I tell everyone to kind of get in touch with when you want to know a bit more about football culture, because they really are the ones who are pushing it. They were the ones who started the whole link between football and fashion and culture. And you see other organizations trying to copy that authenticity that they can't get because it's not their reality. And finding other organizations who do the work, listening to different people, different opinions. Like another great example is Gold Diggers podcast. And, that, depending on whoever's on the cast, between 6 Black women who are just talking football. And it's nothing crazy. It's nothing, it's nothing like initiative, but it's just 6 women, Black women talking football. And from there, you've opened up yourself to a whole new world of people, champions, people who are putting in the work. And that's what it's about. I think a lot of times people think that they have to do it on their own. They don't. There are so many people that I've, had who've been part of my journey, and I wouldn't be where I am now without them, because I know that I can't do it on my own. And it's about recognizing that and seeking people out and asking for help and admitting when you're struggling, admitting when you're wrong, giving them the props when they've helped you. And the problem is a lot of people don't want to do that. They think that it's kind of like oh, I've read this book, so everything should change. I was like, no, there's another book to read. There's another book to read. There's one person you should maybe stop being friends with. There's people you should start checking out. There's events that you should be going to probably over the other ones. Who are you hanging around? What are you absorbing? Who are you pushing through? Because there are people who are doing the work, and there are people who, you know, if we all put them together, could try and make it a better place and an easier place for people to be in. But for example, there's no point of you working with amazing recruiters if your culture is toxic, because then the people would just leave. You know, Gaudenz wrote an article about this a couple of years ago in terms of how organizations have the best intentions with their recruitment, but they haven't fixed their toxic culture. So you just have a lot of Black and brown people who go in thinking, okay, you know, I'll be okay, leaving more scarred than they came in, and off-putting them from certain jobs, certain roles, certain organizations, just from that one experience. So yeah, I mean, I could start listing so many different people to follow, but that's really what it is. It's about finding people who are slightly different to you and just listening to what they're saying and going from there. I think a lot of people think it's going to be this kind of like a, you know, you do it once and everything changes. It's an everyday thing. If it's an every day you seek out someone new, it's an every day you ask for someone's opinion, it's an every day you read a different article. Instead of reading an article by a Black, you know, by a white woman, read one by a Black woman, see the differences, see kind of things that white woman has missed. Because there was an article that was going around talking about misogyny in sports, and the amount of people who were like saying this is fantastic, I was like, it's missing a massive part. Not once were there Black women named in that, but he's also missing how misogynoir is so different in sports to misogyny. And I guess the best example is the WSL, not the WSL, the NWSL, and their abuse case, and how it was Black women who actually came out and blew the whistle for that abuse case. But they also tweeted real life that they know that they will be excluded from the narrative because white women are more important. And there have been no white women who have been affected who have come up and stood for these women, have gone, they need to be included in this as well. And not a single one of them. And it's kind of like, well, what is the point? But I didn't know that until I saw someone who, you know, retweeted that, and I did my own digging. I didn't ask them to tell me everything. I said, oh, that sparked my interest. Oh God. I was like, oh, that sparked my interest. So I'm going to then do the reading and the research on my own. And that's really what it is. You have to just one step at a time, follow someone new on social media, and then from there you follow them. You'll see someone who's been posted on their timeline, and you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. And then you just end up realizing that there's so much more out there, and the content is so much better as well.
So what's interesting there, just as I know we're about to end, but you know, we've talked about reading up on stuff. So Tosin used the word misogynoir. So look that up and do some reading on that, because I think that's really important, because it's about the intersections of race and gender. And so it's what Black women face is not misogyny, because it is different, as she just describes, misogynoir. So have a read of that. And I think that's a really interesting place to start, given the conversation we've had today.
Massive thank you. We have overrun. I've totally had no problem with us overrunning, apart from everybody else listening in and me getting into trouble with people in the background, but that's not a problem for me. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really engaging. There's lots that I will ask anybody else to, if they want to come back, they can come back to Fair Game and we can get in contact with you both and try and see if there's other bits that you've mentioned, your six, the kind of loads of all those people you said to follow. There's loads out there. I think my takeaway would be don't be ignorant. Silence is compliance. I think those are two big ones. And you know, if you can go out and listen and read just one different view from a different person, from a different background to yourselves, then that's a huge way of educating. Thank you so much for your time. We're back again at 1:30 with Anne Taylor who's going to be in conversation with Anne-Marie Batson, talking about how politicians can make a difference to women in football. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And we'll catch up again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.